Death at Daisy's Folly, Chapter 7. When lovely woman stoops to follow and finds too late her heart's betrayed, she'll learn to practice stratagems and wield her power undismayed. Beryl Bardwell, The Loves of Lady Lenore. Amelia had no way of knowing the extent of Lawrence's perfidy, but she could guess. Imagining the worst, Lawrence reunited with the love he had once jilted, she stumbled out of the servants' hall. Halfway up the back stairs, she could go no further. She sank down, sobbing, broken-hearted. After a few moments, she felt a hand on her shoulder. "Amelia," the voice asked, "what's wrong, dear? Is there anything I can do?" Amelia looked up into the face of a young girl, one of the laundry maids whose room she had shared last night. Hearing the comforting voice, she broke into a fresh fit of weeping. The girl, whose name was Meg, sat down beside her on the step and put an arm around her shoulders. "Whatever it is," she said practically, "'tain't bad enough to carry on that way." "Yes, 'tis," Amelia insisted, sniffling. "It's worse." "It's your sweetheart, I bet," Meg said, patting her arm. "You ought to do what the upstairs ladies do, Amelia. Have more'n one sweetheart. That way, when one betrays you, there's another one waiting." Meg's advice was sensible enough, but Amelia's gentle heart almost gave way at the thought of dealing with more than one treacherous man at a time. "I couldn't do that, Meg," she said, and dropped her forehead on her knees. "I'm true." Meg sighed. "I know," she said forlornly. "I couldn't either. First one, then another. I don't see how the ladies do it. I was allus taught to love one for life, good or bad, whatever he does to you." Amelia wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "But what do you do when he's not true?" Meg stood up, slowly shaking her head. "Suffer, I reckon." She stood for a moment, looking down. "I'll see you tonight," she said, and was gone. Amelia sat on the stairs for a few moments more, then wiped her eyes and settled her cap. Lawrence might be a faithless traitor and her heart might be broken, but it would soon be time for the dressing bell and there was work to be done. She climbed the stairs and went down the long hallway to Mrs. Artley's room, where she tapped on the door and opened it. Wearing her dressing gown, Miss Artley sat at the writing desk in front of the velvet-draped window. When Amelia came in, she hastily stacked the pages on which she had been writing and stuffed them into the leather portfolio she took with her wherever she went. Usually Amelia smiled at this little effort at concealment because all the servants at Bishop's Keep knew exactly what Miss Artley, or Beryl Bardwell, for that was the name under which she wrote her sensational fictions, was up to. But it was a part of the game to make believe that they saw nothing, so when Amelia happened upon Beryl Bardwell engaged in the labour of authorship, she smiled and pretended not to notice. This evening, though, she could not summon even a flicker of a smile in response to her mistress's cheery greeting. Miss Artley grew concerned. "You look as if you've been crying, Amelia. Is something wrong?" Mutely, Amelia shook her head. Miss Artley held out her hand. "Oh, come now," she said. "You're not one to cry without a reason. What's happened?" Prompted by this sympathy, Amelia said, "It's Lawrence, miss," and burst into a flood of tears. In a moment she had told the little she knew and the more she imagined, and Miss Artley was holding her and patting her back while she wept. "I'm sure," Miss Artley said gently when the tears had somewhat subsided, "that it is not as bad as it seems. This Winnie person, is she as lovely as you?" Amelia frowned, but wanting to be accurate, "She's much larger." "Larger but not lovelier, then? And her age?" "Oh, much older, miss," Amelia replied from the youthful perspective of 17. "All of 25, I should reckon, and she's quite brazen." "Well then," Miss Artley, who was 27 herself and a spinster, said briskly, "what are we crying for? You have the advantage of beauty and youth. All you need is a little more courage and perhaps a bit of brazenness on your own account. Let Lawrence know that you care for him, Amelia. His heart is with you. I'm sure of it." Amelia felt herself blushing furiously. "It's not his heart I'm worried about, miss," she said in a low voice. "It's the other thing." She felt quite brave in bringing the subject up, but of course she would not have spoken so openly if Miss Artley had not encouraged her, or if she were not an American. American women, as she knew from her clandestine reading of Beryl Bardwell's fictions, were much more open about physical intimacies than were English women. A smile tweaked at Miss Artley's lips. "Yes, well," she said and cleared her throat. "The other thing is a bit of a problem, to be sure, and I'm not suggesting that you violate your principles, but where Lawrence is concerned, you might want to practice a stratagem or two. A stratagem, miss? Amelia was puzzled. It might not hurt to let him see that you have the power to attract other men. Is there a party below stairs this evening? Yes, miss, Amelia said. Although house party weekends meant a great deal more work for the servants, they also presented opportunities for socializing. The kitchen maids would still be doing up the pots and pans after tonight's dinner, and the house steward would be supervising the washing up the gold plate in the pantry, but those who could would steal away to dance and trade gossip and play cards around the fire in the servants' hall. The dressing bell clanged loudly, reminding them both that it was time to change for dinner. Well, a party should be a fine opportunity to let Lawrence see that other men find you attractive, Miss Hartley said, and began to unfasten her dressing gown. You must take a ribbon from the drawer to dress your hair, Amelia, and some of my scent if you like. I shall dispense with your services at bedtime, so go and enjoy yourself. A ribbon and scent? Well, that put an entirely different face on things. Winnie Washbottle was indeed quite brazen, and Amelia was not so blinded by love that she imagined Lawrence braver than he was. If she were to rescue him from that woman's clutches, she would have resort to strategy. She straightened her shoulders, determined. Yes, thank you, miss, she said. I shall. She went to the wardrobe where her mistress's gowns were hung. You wanted to wear the grey tonight? Miss Hartley had stripped her chemise. No, Amelia, I have changed my mind. I shall wear the green silk with the matching gloves, and Aunt Sabrina's emerald pendant, and I've taken the peacock feathers from my hat. I shall want them in my hair. Amelia's eyebrows went up. The green silk cut was low and more daring than the dresses Miss Hartley usually wore. She had purchased it chiefly because Mrs. Farley thought she ought to have at least one such gown, and she had never worn her aunt's emerald pendant, which was a quite lovely jewel, the richest Amelia had ever seen. Taking the green gown from the wardrobe, she changed the subject. Would you know, miss, why your ladyship would be taking his Royal Highness to the workhouse tomorrow? Miss Hartley had just sat down before the mirror. She glanced up, startled, the hairbrush in her hand. To the workhouse? Yes, Amelia said. She laid down the gown on the bed, smoothing out the skirts. The very place where my dear Jenny died, she added sadly. Jenny had been wayward, and when she was discovered to be pregnant and be turned out of her place at Bishop's Keep, this was in the days before the young miss, of course, and ended up in the Chelmsford workhouse, where both she and the babe had died. It was a common enough story, but no less sad for that, and sadly unfair. The man who betrayed Jenny had most certainly not suffered as she had, but that was the way of it, Amelia thought, and her sadness became coloured by anger. Men used women and then abandoned them. She must be sure that such a thing never happened to her. The workhouse, Miss Hartley repeated thoughtfully. Well, it appears that her ladyship has a stratagem or two up her sleeve.